Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the report. I'm Yasmin Khatun and I'll be taking a look at the stories that matter to you, discussing news stories from throughout the week and the ones that you've all been talking about. On the report, we love to hear what you think, and to join the conversation, get tweeting using #TheReport. Later on the programme, we'll be going through the topics that have been trending throughout the week. But before we get into the conversation, let's have a look at the news.
The Libyan Prime Minister has been released after being kidnapped from his hotel in Tripoli by armed men. It is thought that Ali Zaidan was freed when members of another armed group stormed the site where he was being held. Earlier this week, Zaidan has said that relations with the United States wouldn't be affected by a US military raid, which captured Libyan national Abu Anas al-Libi. Also known as Nazir al-Ragay, al-Libi is suspected of taking part in the 1998 bombings of US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. Abu Anas al-Libi is currently being held aboard a US Navy ship in the Mediterranean Sea. The US President Barack Obama has staunchly defended his decision to order commando raids in Libya and Somalia. Over the weekend, thousands of supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood took to the streets of Cairo to march to Tahrir Square. Demonstrators clashed with the army and there was at least 28 fatalities and 100 people are reported to have been injured. Demonstrators were demanding the reinstatement of Egypt's first elected president, Mohamed Morsi, who was ousted in a military coup earlier this summer.
نازلة عشان الشرعية، نازلة عشان أرجع شرعيتي وصوتي اللي خدوه مني وحطوه في صندوق الزبالة. نازلة علشان حق الشهيد، نازلة عشان الناس اللي ماتوا في رابعة واتحرقوا، نازلة علشان إخواتي اللي اعتقلوا، نازلة عشان حاجات كتير.
A heavy military presence stopped the protesters reaching the square. Clashes between Morsi supporters and the police broke out in several other cities too, including Alexandria, Suez, and Aswan. Although making cuts to aid, the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, said the United States will continue to work with the Egyptian military-backed government.
The interim government understands very well our commitment to the success of this government, which we want to see achieved. And by no means is this a withdrawal from our relationship or a severing of our serious commitment to helping the government meet those goals.
Earlier this week, the United States announced it would withhold deliveries of tanks, fighter aircraft, helicopters and missiles, as well as $260 million, £162 million in cash aid from Egypt's military-backed government. In Bangladesh, former opposition lawmaker Abdullah al Andalussi was given a life sentence after he was convicted of war crimes committed during the country's 1971 liberation war. The 82-year-old was found guilty on 9 charges relating to crimes against humanity, arson, and looting. It was the 8th verdict in a trial that has been marred by allegations of political interference. The government of Bangladesh set up the tribunal to try suspected war criminals from the 1971 war. But critics argue that the process is designed to eliminate the Prime Minister's political opponents. Opposition parties and human rights organizations are calling for an international tribunal to re-examine the cases. The Syrian government has been praised by the international community for its cooperation in ridding itself of chemical weapons. An official from the international mission overseeing the stockpile's elimination said Damascus had made an excellent start. However, Turkey's Prime Minister, Tayyip Erdogan, says praise for the government of President Bashar al-Assad is inappropriate.
Şimdi ben size burada bir şey söyleyeceğim. Bak siz de insansınız. Ben de insanım. 110 bin kişiyi öldüren bir insanın davranışlarını nasıl övgüyle karşılayacağız? Böyle bir şey olabilir mi? Böyle bir şey olabilir mi? Soruyorum size. Bırakın şimdi neticesi ölüm olan.
Over 100,000 civilians have been killed as a result of the civil war taking place in Syria.
Bütün değerli arkadaşlar, Beşar Esad'ı ben artık bir siyasi olarak kabul etmiyorum. O devlet terörü estiren bir teröristtir. Bu kadar açık konuşuyorum. 110 bin kendi halkını, vatandaşını öldüren bir insan teröristtir. ve şu anda orada bir devlet terörü estirmektedir.
تركيا الثمن غاليا. الإرهاب لا يمكن أن تضعه كرتا في جيبك. هو كالعقرب عندما تضعه في أول فرصة سوف يلدغك.
Bashar al-Assad agreed to destroy the chemical weapons after a sarin gas attack on the outskirts of Damascus in August was blamed on his government. The incident was described as the world's worst chemical weapons attack in 25 years. In Turkey, a ban on women wearing the Islamic headscarf in state institutions has been lifted, ending a decades-old restriction. The move is part of a package of reforms and takes immediate effect in the Muslim-majority country. The ban on hijab dates back almost 90 years and has kept many women from joining the public workforce. The Turkish Prime Minister said the lifting of the ban has ended a dark era, and teachers hailed the move.
Başörtüsü takmanın hukuki karşılığı uyarı bir üstü kınamadır. Onun ötesi yapılamaz. Fakat bize peş peşe hiç savunmalarımız alınmadan.
The reform program also bolsters the rights of Turkey's Kurdish community, including changes to the electoral system, the broadening of language rights, and permission for villages to use their original Kurdish names. Rayan Clementson, Islam Channel.
Now with me to discuss some of those stories is Abdullah al Andalussi, from the co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative, and Walid Saffour, president of the Syrian National Coalition. Also joining me later on in the programme will be Glyn Robbins from United East End. But before we get to that, let's come straight to you. Now, I want to come to you, Mr. Walid Saffour. We saw Erdogan there calling Assad a terrorist, saying the international community should not be praising him for the efforts that he is making to rid himself of chemical weapons. Is that justified?
Bashar al-Assad has killed so far over than 150,000 civilians in Syria. He is a war criminal, and he is a genocide perpetrator by all means. We have documented thousands of cases that condemn Bashar al-Assad and his regime, and unless the Security Council veto by Russia and China, he will be forwarded to the ICC so soon. Let me shed some lights on what's going in Syria, for example. More than the 150,000 fatalities we have because of the measurement, the government measurement put on the hospitals. We have 1% of the Syrian populations died. That means 263,000 Syrian people died from the beginning of the revolution 19 months ago. They died because lack of medicine, because lack of medication. This is another crime. He put in jail over than 200,000 people. The infrastructure of Syria has been turned into rubble. More than 2 million homes and buildings were destroyed.
But how do we move away from that? Now, there are talks of truce, but the rebel factions seem very disparate. Now, how would we move forward? Abdullah, can I bring you in?
Sure. Well, I think there's different sides at play in the game of Syria, and it has become a global game with different players. I think America and all of the Western powers have an agenda for Syria, so they want to remove Syria as an ally from Iran. They don't want Syria to be taken over by the popular forces for opposition against the secular regime of Bashar al-Assad, which is the Islamic groups and so on and so forth, who want to establish an Islamic state. I mean, most Syrians want an Islamic state, but because the USA does not want to see that occur, and many secularists don't want to see that occur, they will not. That's why they haven't been providing weapons and things to the group. So they want a stalemate until both sides are weak enough such that they can compromise and America can
Erdogan has been accused of supplying weaponry to rebel forces. Can I bring you back in here? Do you think the international community should be playing a bigger role, or are they playing too much of a role already?
Sorry?
The international community, do you think they're playing too big a role already in Syria, or are they not playing enough of a role?
Every superpower and minor power they want to play their own role. We have the Russian and Chinese role, we have the Iranian role, we have the American roles, we have the Arab League role. There are many, many people, and all of them, their roles are contradicted. And this, the Syrian people were caught across the fire of all these people who were playing with the blood of the Syrian people. This is right, but we, the Syrian people, have got our own will towards a civil and democratic state. We would like to creep gradually from 50 years under the dictatorship of Bashar al-Assad and his father, Hafez al-Assad, and the Ba'athist state, which imposed the brutalities, the severity on the Syrian people. This is what we are going, and we are aiming, we are striving to do.
Just today, Human Rights Watch, the American organization, released a report saying that rebel forces were also behind mass killings. They said just under 200 people were killed by rebel forces. I'll come to you very quickly, and then I'll bring you in also. So it's not just killings on one side.
Let me tell you that the Syrian regime, what they call the defense army, the National Defense Army, has perpetrated many massacres in Banyas, in Tartus, and in Latakia. What happened in Latakia was exaggerated too much by the Human Rights Watch and what we expect today or tomorrow by Amnesty International. They have got hidden agenda, these human rights groups. I've been in touch with them many times. I forwarded to them many facts which they disregard, but they have regarded other sources, the sources of the Syrian regime. The number was so much exaggerated. We don't agree to bloodshed of civilians, of any sect, of any side, by all means. But what happened on the next? There are now captives, 120 captives from they are military officers of the regime. The Syrian National Coalition asked directly and indirectly by other agents that let's exchange them. And the Syrian regime told us, kill them, we don't want them.
Now, Brother Abdullah, you debate with many different individuals on an international platform, both nationally here, many people that you've sat on the platform with. Now, do you think that's the case? Do you think there's a misrepresentation going on here?
Of course. I think that a lot of the Islamic groups are maligned in Syria, and they're maligned for a very one simple reason, is they represent the vox populi of the Syrians, which is a desire for an Islamic system. They've already had a secular system. Bashar al-Assad is a secularist, and they've suffered under that. Secularism has failed to unite the Muslims in the Muslim world. Look at Egypt, look at virtually every secular country in the Muslim world is fractious with infighting, and look at Iraq, for example, with their so-called civil government, how unifying that's being. So Muslims really want an Islamic system, which is what was there before the Sykes-Picot Treaty created the artificial state, which is now called Syria. And it used to be called Al-Sham before. And I think that currently the Muslims are trying to do this despite the fact that there is a lot of outside pressure to demonize the Islamic groups, which, according to Jane's information group, said that Islamic groups comprise the majority of rebel forces. The majority of the 100,000 rebel forces are Islamic groups and so on. So I think
I'll just take
they're being
very
demonized.
briefly from yourself, Mr. Walid, how does the country move forward?
No, we are moving towards civil and democratic state. We are here not prepared at this moment to go to an Islamic state. It's a very crucial issue, but we want a state where all people, all Syrian people, enjoy their freedoms. And then I know that the majority are Muslim, but because of the very complex situation we are put in, it is unlikely and impossible for us to impose directly and straight away.
So many things.
It is. I understand the perspective from which my friend speaks, but now, in practical terms, it is too difficult, and it complicates the situation more and more if we say that.
There's a lot to be spoken about here, but we are going to have to move on to our next topic now.